In the world of the unknown, two souls combine to experience and unite the paranormal with its history. Join Paul and Chris on a quest to find answers only at Experiences of the Unknown.
What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode
of Experiences of the Unknown.
I let
See, I
him
was
do
going
it
to
this
let you
time.
do it, but
I let you do it.
Gee, thanks.
You wanted that one. You won that one.
I wanted that.
Tonight's episode, it's going to be a little different, a little more outside of the our normal zone.
Our box, outside
Yeah.
of the box.
Hey, but we got to try new things.
That's right.
We're going to be talking about the ghost of Flight
401.
401. There's not many podcasts about this.
No.
There's a couple, but not a lot. Let's talk about it.
Okay.
What you have there? Let's go. This is Paul's. If you guys haven't figured
I
out,
had to
this
put my
one's
glasses
Paul's
on
baby.
so I can, just in case I got to read some notes.
Yeah.
But it was funny. We just got done doing the last broadcast from last week, and it just popped in my head. Ghost of Flight 401. I don't even know how this idea came up, but
He just decided, he was like,
Yeah.
this sounds great. We're gonna do it.
it's going to do it. and not too many people like either know the story or they don't talk about it much. Only
Well, a lot of it has to do with the story actually trying to be. It was being covered up for a little while.
right.
You know, there's not many stories of it until the hauntings came into effect.
Right. And then they
So-
tried to sweep that underneath the carpet. Too.
Right. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about, like, what is Flight 401?
Well, Flight 401.
I put him on the spot.
He does this all the time. Hey, like I said, I'm not perfect.
You got to put him on the spot so that way
You gotta put
they
me
can
on the
get
spot.
used to it.
Well, actually, Flight 401 started off as a regular flight from John F. Kennedy. It flew out of Kennedy Airport in New York, and it was approaching Miami, Florida's airport when the flight was going good until they reached.
Crash into the Everglades.
Yes.
Sorry, not sorry, but this is how we go through it.
And their flight was going good until 11:32 when they went to land. They had their issues with the landing. Their landing gear lights didn't come on.
So let's talk about the crash. The crash really happened over a simple little indication light inside
A
the
5-cent
cockpit.
bulb. That's all it was.
Yeah.
Or 15-cent bulb.
Yeah, whatever. So the reason the crash occurred is simply because this indication light indicating that the landing gears per se weren't activated. They weren't opened.
But they were, though.
Right. Well,
They
that's later on they found out they
Well,
actually were.
yeah.
At the time, the pilots and the crew did not know it. With a deviation of looking through that and trying to figure out, like, what's going on with the landing gears, like, what's going on with this, what's going on with that, you know, trying to figure out. And they're all just thinking about, like, how are they going to land, like, how are they going to
There's
fix
a lot
this
of
landing
chaos
gear.
going on. A lot of
A
chaos.
lot of chaos
Chaos.
chaos going on.
A lot
And,
of chaos.
for some reason, in the midst of everything, they end up deactivating the autopilot function of the actual plane. Now let's talk about the actual plane. The plane was a newer style jet. Basically.
plane was
It
new.
extremely quiet. It was new of its class and of its time.
The plane was only 4 months old.
Right.
Brand new.
So these pilots, according to the history of these pilots, they had a lot of flight hours. They knew what they were doing. It's not like they didn't know what they were doing. But in the midst of this whole chaos, they ended up deactivating the autopilot function. They were just so caught up on a little light that didn't come on that
But they didn't
practically
realize-
caused the crash.
Right. They didn't realize. They were so focused on the landing gear and the bulb, they didn't realize that the autopilot was kicked out.
Right. So it essentially made the altitude of the plane drop And by doing that, they didn't realize, they thought they were still flying. And at that time, you got to keep in mind, planes aren't as advanced as they are now, where they have, the altitude detection where it starts yelling at you like, you're dropping your altitude or your autopilot is off. They didn't have any of that. It was just, it's all manual. Like, if you knew what you were doing, you're good. But if for some reason you deactivated your autopilot, then it wasn't going to scream at you and tell you, because there was a lot of common sense back in the day.
Right. And they decided not to land, which they were given a permission to keep an altitude of 2,000 feet.
2,000 feet. And they
swing
were to
west.
fly, right, they were to fly in a circular pattern.
Right. And to fly over the Everglades. Well, when you go over the Everglades, it's pitch dark. There's no lights. So they didn't know they were going down slowly.
Right.
So, I mean...
So, the plane crashed. 101 people ended up dying.
Yep.
75 still lived. Which is amazing because according to the way the plane crashed, it was demolished. Like, everything in the plane was completely destroyed. It ended up hitting, I think, the left wing first, and then
Left
from
wing
there
first,
just
yes.
completely destroyed the plane. So, let's talk about... Okay, so the crash. So you have the crash. Now, what happens after the crash?
Well, after the crash, of course, they get the victims and everything, but what they did was they salvaged all the parts from the plane, and they reused them on a lot of the other L-1011s that they had.
So keep in mind, at this time, back in the day, these planes were not mass-produced as they are today.
Right.
This being one of the newest jet of that time, they had a need for parts. They had a need to use what
they just
this plane
recycled
had.
the parts over and over and over and over again.
Correct. So they used all the parts that they could
Right.
salvage from the actual plane wreck, and ended up using it for other planes, other newer jets that they currently had on the fleet.
Right.
So, what happens next?
What they did was they used all the parts that they salvaged from Flight 401, put them in, like what we just said, in other L-1011s. That's when they start spotting the ghost of Loft and Repo.
So, let's talk about the first sighting. One of the first sightings, there was another plane, had some issues.
There was a couple planes had issues.
Right. The first plane had some issues. And in the midst of the flight, I forget what the issues were, what were coming along the actual plane itself. However, what happened?
Well, what they were doing was how they were spotting the spirits of Repo and Loft was just plain and simple. The stewardess were using microwaves. They would take the food up, but as soon as they would close the door, they were looking to the glass of the microwave, and they would see him standing there. And of course, they're going to turn around and look, but he wasn't there. And it's same with the seats when they reused some of the seats on the other planes from Flight 401.
Right.
The stewardess and all that were seeing Loft and Repo sitting in the seats, like they look like you and I.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden they just disappeared.
One of the instances, the plane was having issues. The plane, for some reason, the pilot was trying to figure out what was going on with it. For some reason, this other person just somehow was standing right next to the plane, looks over at the pilot and says, "It's okay. I've took care of the issues. This plane is not going to crash."
But that was the spirit of
Right.
Repo.
Yep. So once that happened, apparently this pilot disappeared. They couldn't find him on the plane, and come to find out, it was Repo.
But the thing is, every time one of the stewardess and the pilots and everything, anybody that worked for Eastern Airlines, when they spotted the ghost and everything, they would put everything into the logbook.
Right.
And then once they entered that in the logbook, then Eastern Airlines would send them to a psychiatrist.
But what happened to the logbook?
That disappeared because they were getting so many reports.
Right. The logbook somehow mysteriously disappeared.
But if they didn't put it in the logbook, or if they didn't see the psychiatrist shrink, they would be fired. They would lose their jobs.
Yeah.
But then it got to the point where the sightings was starting to, everyday people getting on the planes.
Right.
They were starting to see the spirits of
One
Loft and Repo.
right, and one of the reports was that I believe it was Repo, or was it Bert? Might have been Bert.
Bert.
Bert was he was in first class. Actually, the spirit of him was in first class. The flight attendant noticed another pilot on the actual first class seat. So she figured he's coming back from, like normally when you're a pilot, you go flying, you take another plane to head back home on your days off. She thought it was another pilot, like heading back home. Right. She lets the actual airplane pilot know that, hey, listen, we have another pilot on board, first class. Right. So he decides he wants to go meet him and talk to him. So he gets off, goes over to talk to him. He sees this guy sitting on the first class seat, and he recognizes who he was at that point in time. Once he recognizes him, he looks over at her, he tells her who this guy is, and he just disappears. And this is one of those instances where the people of the plane, and not just one person, multiple people actually witness him sitting there.
Right. Now, supposedly, Repo's favorite drink was bay rum. And that's another thing, like with some of the parts and them starting to see like his spirit and everything. They would smell the bay rum after seeing his spirit. Now, when they first took the parts away from the wreckage, they stored them into some warehouse on the somewheres, and probably somewheres on the airport. There was a couple of the stewardess and some of the executives from the airline. They decided to go in, just look at the stuff, whatever they were able to salvage. They were smelling bay rum. And one of the executives noticed that and smelled that. They said, I smell bay rum. But it didn't sink in that was Repo's favorite drink. And then his shadows and everything were seen around the stuff that they salvaged. Yeah, of the stuff that they salvaged. And that was in the warehouse, which is probably some hangar at the airport.
That's what they usually do. They take a hangar,
right?
Especially for like plane wrecks, and they bring the wreck in and try to recreate everything that happened, so they can figure out exactly what happened with the actual plane wreck.
But they wanted to get it out of there quickly.
Right.
So.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So I mean, you have things like that. I mean, you have there's other sightings. Who was it? Donald. It was who was it? The engineer. It was Repo, right?
Repo was the flight engineer.
Repo.
Right.
There was an issue with the oven. Did you hear about this one?
No, I didn't hear that one.
The issue with the oven, where the flight attendant went to notify the pilot, like, hey, listen, we have an issue with the oven. He sends a mechanic to work on it. When the mechanic gets there to work on the actual oven, he looks over at one of the flight attendant, and he's like, she tells him, hey, it's okay, like the other guy already came and fixed it. He's like, well, I'm the only one working today, like nobody else was here.
Well, apparently he didn't
the
know.
Oven was fixed, and come to find out, Repo was the one that fixed it. So apparently, obviously, there were so many emotions into flying that plane. There's so many emotions and so many feelings attached to the parts of that plane that is causing them to still come back and work on it, or it did at that time.
And you know what's sad? It's just that Repo, he was not scheduled to work that flight. He just wanted to be home with his family and his kids for New Year's. So he got with his friend, switched flights around. And that to me, that's sad, because he did it all for good reasons, to be with his family, and he ended up dying.
Hey, what is your time is your time.
Exactly.
No matter.
Exactly.
That's just how I look at it. What is your time is your time. No matter what you do, no matter how you try to avoid it, it's going to happen one way or another.
You can't stop it. There's a time to be born and a time to die.
Right. You just know one.
Right.
So, yeah, there's this is a very interesting story. What else you have for us in regards to that?
Well, also, they were having the viewing. They went back. Of course, you know how they had the viewing. They go back and have food and all that at the family house.
Yeah.
Well, They had about 40, 50 people. A couple of the other now Repo's wife was a retired stewardess, so she knew everybody. So a lot of the stewardess, they would come and they would help her. She was so upset, they went up to check on their children because they had a boy and a girl. And when they got up to the bedroom, the one boy was awake, but he didn't say anything, but you could tell he was scared. And the one stewardess, like, she stood up, she's like, smelling? And then she looked at the other stewardess, she's like, it smells like bay rum. So again, there's the bay rum. That's Repo's favorite drink.
That's one of his known sightings,
Right.
like his smell.
So apparently he was there with a visitation to his children.
Yeah, so I mean, think about like when someone you love passed away. You know what I mean?
Right.
A lot of times there's different smells that your brain automatically orients with that person.
You get cigarette smoke. You get flower scents.
You get their cologne, perfume, whatever they were wearing, like whatever they used to wear. Like a lot of people experience a smell thing. Like to come back. I remember during one of my investigations that I did, like that was one of the things that was reported. There was a report of flowers.
Right.
I was actually in Fort Delaware.
Right.
And apparently the lady that ran the kitchen always had like this flower smell to her, like perfume smell. And while we were doing the investigation, like we started getting this smell. And they said she didn't like men in her kitchen, especially in her like this one little closet that she had. So I ended up going in there and locking myself, and like the smell was strong. Like, but that's kind of bringing in like that's something that happens, especially with hauntings.
Right.
Or when your soul's still so attached to whatever you love doing. And obviously this was the case.
I wonder what happened to the logbook. Because that disappeared, and then they said a new logbook was put in. I wonder who's got that.
So one of the things that I've heard was the simple fact that the actual airplane company didn't want it to get out.
No, they didn't. As a matter of fact, I'm going to read something. Now, NBC back in the crash happened in 72. They brought a movie out in 1978. NBC aired it once. It was never
aired again.
It was never. It was never. They never reran it. It was never seen again. So I gotta put my glasses on so I can read something to you. So I was wondering if it was like available on DVD, if I could even get it in VHS,
right?
Just to see. And I saw it years and years and years ago. So I come across it, and it's pretty interesting. I even printed it out, and I'll see if Chris can put it up when we release the
put it out.
The thing. It says here. First of all, this is the gentleman. The gentleman used to work for NBC. He got the original VHS tape from it, and this is what he wrote. And I thought it was pretty interesting. And this goes to show that they didn't talk about the paranormal.
Do you have his name and everything on there?
Up here, but I don't know if we should really mention his name.
Oh, he wrote it and he put it online. And
it's right on eBay.
He wants to be recognized.
He says, first of all, this movie has never been released. For many years, NBC would not acknowledge that they were ever showed the movie due to pressure that was being put on them by the executive of Eastern Airlines, who were afraid that publicity about ghosts on their planes would cause decrease in business.
Huh.
So they wanted it like shoved underneath the carpet, not even mentioned it again.
I want to get back to something. You say you got that off of eBay?
Yes. Here we go.
Yeah, I got this off of eBay.
Got this off. But you know what, though? I did get the movie, and I did watch the movie, and I'll bring it for you to watch.
Okay.
I forgot to bring it, didn't
I have it.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. You can get it on YouTube.
If you guys want to watch the movie, it's actually on YouTube.
It's on YouTube.
It's like an hour and 11 minutes or an hour and some minutes.
But me, I have a massive collection of true ghost stories and all that, and on DVD, I just got it and threw it in my collection.
Yes, and we'll just keep adding to that eBay collection.
Add into that collection. Don't know who the hell I'm going to leave it to when I die, but...
I know. Yeah, so going back to it, I mean, it's definitely an interesting story. If you guys want to know more about it, I mean, there's a lot of things out there. There's also a lot of things of the actual airplane company, Eastern, stating that these stories weren't true. And when the movie first came out, they didn't want it going out because of the stories and what you mentioned.
Yeah, but the thing is, though, it started to spread out. Like the people that was just getting on the planes, like strangers, it was starting to go past the company.
Well, the interesting part about that is that shortly after all these sightings, the company made it a point to take all these parts off of the planes.
Right.
So if it wasn't something that really happened, if it was something that it was being made up, why would you like rush to take all these parts off the plane? First of all, like,
right.
Obviously there was issues there, and there was things going on, and the whole crash could have been avoided. There's different ways it could have been avoided, but I mean, I'm sure that at that time they this is one of the first planes they were flying. Like, they didn't really have much knowledge of what to do if this happened. They didn't have like, you know, any kind of books or anything to tell them like what to do. Air traffic control wasn't there to help them
and
out.
they didn't even realize that they were going down.
Right.
That's what's sad about it. They were like going.
Since then,
yeah.
That's why the planes now have an altitude alarm to let you know when you're losing altitude.
But they weren't going down fast. They were just losing altitude like slowly, so they couldn't tell. And they still thought they were at 2,000 feet. And the last, and I believe it's a loft that asked the question, are we still at 2,000 feet? And then one of them asked, what? And then it just crashed.
Right.
225 miles an hour into the ground.
And Repo, if I'm not mistaken, was the one that was in the actual carrier downstairs.
Yeah, he was down in the cockpit, yeah. But they did get his voice, though. On another flight, another L-1011, I think they were going to land in Mexico, if I'm not mistaken, when one of their motors caught on fire. One of their...
I've heard about that.
Yeah. And he was spotted in the cockpit, and he told them there'll never be another accident on an L-1011.
Yeah.
And they got his voice on recording. And they played... Then that pilot played it back to one of the executives that was trying to keep it underneath the carpet.
Right.
So
that's interesting. The simple fact that he was so passionate about it, he probably felt horrible because you think about it, 101 people died because of a single little light bulb.
Little bulb.
Like, who would think that a light bulb would cause like 101 people to die? But I mean, that's things that stay in people's mind.
Right.
You know, that was probably like something that played over and over again right before he died.
Right.
You know? And it's sad, but at the same time, like, I mean, it defined flying, really. Like, there's a lot of different things, a lot of safety features that came out because of that one incident.
So what they did was they pulled Eastern Airlines, they re-pulled all the salvage parts off of the planes. They put it on, and I believe they destroyed it.
Yeah.
And the holdings seemed to cease after they did that.
Right. So
pretty amazing story, though.
It's crazy. Like, it's interesting.
I thought so. And there's still a lot more to the story.
Yeah.
But hey.
If you guys want to look it up, we'll put some of it up.
Yeah. Actually, if you go on YouTube, there is one of the stewardess that survived the crash. You can find that on YouTube, and she talks a good half hour about the crash.
Yeah, and a lot of people like that actually survived that crash are no longer alive too.
Well, you're thinking, now that was 49 years ago. It'll be 49 years ago this December. So next year
they were probably already in their 30s. You know what I mean?
And they were probably like their 30s, 20s, 30s, 40s then. And we're talking about next year it'll be 50 years since that crashed.
Yeah. So but anyways, I mean, you got anything else you want to add to this?
No, I'm pretty good. Are you pretty good?
I'm good.
I'm good.
We covered pretty much the basics of it.
Yeah.
So
I think it's a pretty interesting story. So if you go on YouTube...
Just like the Philadelphia experiment.
Oh my God. We're going to do that yet. But I think there's a reason why I can't comprehend that, because...
The funny part is I talk about the Philadelphia experiment. Look how the audio went. Big Z.
But you can go on YouTube. You can check out the movie, or you can... I was lucky to get a good copy.
We'll put the link on our YouTube page of the actual movie link.
Amazon, if you go on Amazon, I believe they have a book that you can buy. eBay's got 2-3 books on.
Well, there's multiple different types of books written on that case. There's different ways you can look at it. You can look at it like on the aeronautic side of things, where what happened, what caused the plane to crash, or you can look at it into like the haunting aspect of it,
Right.
where you're doing research on the types of hauntings and what exactly caused it.
Right.
Even though they still haven't admitted till this day, and a lot of it is hearsay, but at the end of the day, it's up to you to make your own decision.
Let me just say this before we end the show. After I watched the movie and I looked for the information and everything, I thought about Repo's family. Because like I mentioned earlier, his wife had a feeling that something was going to happen. And she kept telling him she loved him. I love you, I love you. And she didn't want him to go. She said, we're fine. We're fine. Just keep the original flight. It's just only New Year's. We were together all the time anyway. She didn't want him to change that flight, and he did.
Do you think that she probably foresaw what was going to happen?
I think she did. She knew something.
Right.
She knew something, and I was just thinking about her and what their kids were doing today. For some odd reason, I don't know why, but it's just sad.
Yeah.
Over a 5-cent light bulb.
Over a light bulb.
101
people. That's crazy.
Yep.
Anyways, but thanks you. Thanks you.
Thanks you
guys for watching. If you like the video, just keep sharing. Unfortunately, we're doing these videos as we can. So we're trying to get them up once a week. Last week we didn't do one. We apologize, but from now on, we're going to try to do them at least once a week.
Now, next weekend, you have an investigation that you're going to be doing.
Next weekend,
we're not going to be doing one next weekend.
So next weekend, we're also going to be off. So we're probably not going to do anything unless we decide to do something in the week sometime.
Right.
But until then, thanks for watching. If you like the videos, subscribe, share, and tell your friends. We're trying to make them under 30 minutes. That way, if you get in the car to drive somewhere, you can listen to us. You can listen to us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google,
Apple,
Amazon. You have
Apple.
YouTube, Apple CarPlay, or
check out our Facebook
Apple
page.
Podcast. And check us out on Facebook. I'm actually going to be going to Bub's Brewery next weekend.
Yes.
And then we
could even talk about that.
Yeah, we have a lot of things.
I'm not going, but we can still talk about it.
We have a lot of things coming up.
We have one April 17th. We can't talk about it yet, but we could even do a podcast on that.
Yeah, we can do one there.
Yeah. We can, yeah.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, thanks for watching. Once again.
Have a good one. Thank you.
Thanks, you too.